We're painting 6 lockers for FaZe, and today we're doing Adapt. And no, he doesn't know that this is being created, so don't tag him, and if your name is FaZe Adapt, stop watching right now. We started by, of course, prepping the locker, then we painted a base coat of white and threw down some stencils and tape to section everything off, because this is by far the most detailed locker we're doing for them. And that's because there are 8 different MW2 camos in here, all of which are very intricate. We laid down each of the base coats with rollers, and then Zuki tried to hand paint each of the camos, and then quickly realized that not only does it look bad, but it also was taking way too long. So we quickly resorted to stencils, which also took a long time, but we were able to split up the work because Zuki was upstairs printing the stencils, I was downstairs placing them and then painting over them, which definitely helped move things along faster, but it was still going extremely slow because there were hundreds and hundreds of stencils to place. And then finally, after 2 days of placing stencils and painting over them, we were able to remove everything and reveal the final piece. I think it came out absolutely amazing considering the time crunch that we were on, but let me know what you think about it and let me know who you think we're gonna do next. We're painting 6 lockers for FaZe, and today we're doing Ron. And just like Adapt, he has no idea that this is even being made, so don't tag him, and if your name is Ron, stop watching right now. This locker is a little bit different than the rest of them because this is the only one that's gonna kind of change shape. And that's because we're turning this locker into a phone booth or a payphone, which is kind of an if you know type thing, so let me know if you get it. But we had to add molding to all the corners of the locker to actually make it look more like a phone booth. We added a payphone stencil to the front, and then we started spray painting everything red, which is now my least favorite spray paint color because for some reason it got everywhere. Then to make the lines on the phone booth, I had to take a roll of tape and cut it in half using this kind of rig that I made because all the tapes we had were either too thin or too thick. Then we made a grid pattern across the whole locker with that tape and then sprayed red over it to kind of prevent leakages, but I think that was kind of unnecessary. It probably would have been fine without it. But we love wasting time over here. Then finally, we sprayed kind of a silver metallic spray over it to give the effect of a window and removed all the tape very satisfyingly, I may add. And then we threw a pair of varsity Kizzos in there, which drop on June 21st. So let me know if you like this locker more or less than Adapts, and let me know if you get why we made it a payphone. We're painting 6 lockers for FaZe, and today we're doing Jason. And seriously, stop tagging them. These are supposed to be a surprise. I don't want them to see it. For this locker, we found out Jason's favorite animes, which is Chainsaw Man, Attack on Titan, and Jujutsu Kaisen, got the mangas, ripped out the pages, and then pasted them all over the locker. And I'm gonna tell you right now that Jason almost didn't get this locker because I also am a pretty big weeb myself. I love all of these shows, and this locker just came out too good. I didn't want to give it up. Attack on Titan is his favorite, so we saved that for the front, and I gotta say, it was hard to choose which pages went on the top layer because we were trying to save the best illustrations for last, but they're all so good it was hard to pick. At this point, we felt like it needed a little splash of color, so we printed out a red anime-themed FaZe logo, pasted that on there, threw a pair of our varsity Kizzos that drop on June 21st in there, and that was that. Now, I'd love to show you every single detail of every single page that we pasted on here, but that would take forever, and the internet has the attention span of a squirrel, so I definitely can't do that. But let me know what you think about it, and let me know who you think is next. We're painting 6 lockers for FaZe, and today we're doing Lacey. And no, it's not an Ozempic box. We thought it would only be right to theme this locker after the man himself, Kobe Bean Bryant, so we masked out a snake around the whole locker and then custom made a snake scale stencil to add scales to the snake. We used a gray-black gradient, so gray on the top and then black on the bottom to kind of add some dimension to the snake and make it look like it was 3D. After that, we taped up the whole snake and then started painting everything else on the locker. We painted the sides purple, the front red, and then came back and started adding stencils, an 8 on one side, a Thug's FaZe logo on the front, and then of course a 24 on the other side. We painted over all those stencils white, then added more stencils before finally painting over everything with yellow. This is the only locker that we added shadows to, so you can see right here I'm adding shading underneath the snake, and every other aspect on this locker has shading as well, so it came together really beautifully to give it some good dimension. We added some eyes and a tongue to the snake as some final touches, and then we took everything off and the piece was done. We threw a pair of our varsity Kizzos that drop on June 21st in there, and that's that. As a huge NBA fan myself, this was a pretty special piece for me to make, and I'm glad it came out so amazing. But let me know what you think, and rest in peace, Kobe and Gigi. We're on the 5th FaZe locker, and this one's going to Silky. And since he's from New York, which is one of the birthplaces of graffiti, we thought it would be cool to kind of merge the two. So the idea was to make an abstract New York skyline design, of course, with spray paint. And little to no stencils, because that doesn't really fit the graffiti vibe. So first, I came in and kind of roughly mapped out where the sky and the sunset was going to be, and then Zuki came in and mapped out where the city and the buildings were going to be. It took some playing around with to get everything everything clean and in the right spot, but after we got everything where we wanted it and let it dry, we came back in and started outlining the skyline. Zuki was going around laying the foundation down, tracing out where everything should be, and I was following behind with a thicker black marker to make sure everything was nice and bold. We made some slight miscalculations in where the buildings and the sunset should end, so we had to go in and fix that, and then finally we added some phase logos with a custom stencil that we made, and this is the only time that we used the stencil. Then to top it all off, I added some stars using this old trick where you spray on the back of a marker and blow on it to kind of create this splatter. We threw a pair of our varsity Kizzos in there. They drop on June 21st, and yes, he's gonna get a box with them, but let me know what you think about the locker. I thought my days of Big Red Boot destruction were over, but then my buddy Trey Flip asked me if I could customize his pair, and of course I'm not gonna turn that down. He mainly wanted me to do this because when he wore them while they were high tops, they ripped up his shins per usual, and he wanted me to turn them into low tops. Then he made the mistake of giving me full creative freedom, with the only guideline being using purple and pink. And I gotta admit, I had a lot of fun doing these because usually when I'm doing a Big Red Boot, I'm trying to recreate a character's shoes, but with these I got to go completely wild. So I stuck to the purple and pink colorway that he gave me. I made the base purple, added a gradient pink to the sole, and also made the collar pink. Then I started gluing these metal spikes all over the place, and before you ask, no, these are not gonna last a whole long time, but I just wanted to make these as cool as they could be because Big Red Boots are unwearable in the first place. They're very uncomfortable. And to make them even more uncomfortable and unwearable, I added these giant metal spikes to the collar, so he's probably gonna impale his own legs while he's walking. But functionality was not the goal here, so it's okay. I glued the collar down to the base to secure it, and this is the final result. I love how these came out. It's the first time I've got to go wild on a pair of these, but let me know what you think. Here's how we shipped the phase locker. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably seen these lockers that we painted for phase because we've been spamming the videos, but it's time to actually ship them now. And we've never shipped anything this big before, so it took a lot of problem solving to figure out how to actually get these there. You can't just send them UPS. So we first found a pallet in the trash behind the warehouse, and then we started wrapping all the lockers in plastic wrap, cardboard, and styrofoam. There were many layers, and we all had to take turns because we kept getting dizzy. But we had to make sure they were safe and secure because they were about to go on a 3,000-mile journey from Florida to Los Angeles. Once we had them all wrapped up, we had to play a game of Tetris to get these to fit on the pallet, but it was actually a lot easier than I thought it was going to be, even though they were a little bit too big. Then we rewrapped everything again about 150,000 times. Then we had our buddy Navi help us finish everything up, and without him, we literally wouldn't have been able to do this. So to thank him, I removed an iguana that was living in his warehouse. And since then, the lockers have been delivered, so let me know if you see them on stream. And just as a side note, the varsity Kizzos that we put in all the lockers and that we're wearing in this video are live right now. Limited stock. They're not going to restock. Good luck, and let me know if you grab a pair. We're finally on the last phase locker, and this one goes to Max. It was pretty much a no-brainer on what to theme this locker after because Max just released his album 5 Forever. So we wanted to turn this locker into the album cover. I started with this pink spray paint. I hated the color and the finish, so I repainted it, and then we started adding stencils. And this is where we ran into our first issue. We didn't allow enough time for the paint to dry before we tried adding the stencil, so all the paint got ripped up. It was a huge headache, but we fixed it nonetheless. And if you're sitting there wondering, why didn't you just give it more time to dry? Why does it look like you're rushing? That's because we are. We only had 1 day per locker, so we had to get everything done as fast as possible. The next step was to make the speakers, so we added some circular stencils and then spray painted gradients over those, and then added another circular stencil and then spray painted a gradient on top of that. Then we added some of that paint from earlier into an airbrush and started going over the stencils to kind of make them look like they were glowing. And then finally, after about 12 hours of painting, we were able to add the final touches, which really brought this thing together. We got these speaker covers on Amazon and just drilled them into the locker. And of course, before we could send it off, we had to put a pair of varsity Kizzos that drop on June 21st in there, but let me know what you think about this locker and where it ranks amongst the others. We finally finished all 6 phase lockers, but which one's the best? We'll start with Jason's, which is my personal favorite because it's anime. We got the mangas of his favorite animes, ripped out the pages, pasted them to the locker, and it came out super clean. Next is Ron's payphone locker. We got molding from Home Depot, glued it to all the corners of the locker just to make it look more like an actual payphone, spray painted it, taped it all over, and that was that. It was pretty simple, but it came out really nice. Then we have Lacey's locker, which is mainly themed after Kobe. We had a giant black mamba wrapping the whole locker. We added his numbers, a phase logo, a thugs logo because that's Lacey's community, and this one just came out absolutely crazy. After that, we have a Daps locker, which was an absolute headache. This was by far the most detailed locker that we did. We had to paint all these MW2 camos individually, which took forever, but those small details are what made this locker as great as it is. Following that, we have Silky's locker. This one's themed around New York City and graffiti, so we made this New York skyline and kind of an abstract graffiti vibe. It's not for everybody. Some people love it, some people hate it. I definitely love it.
And the winner is Black Boy Max.
And last, but certainly not least, Black Boy Max's locker. We themed this one around his album cover from 5 Forever. We threw some fake speakers on there, pink logos, and and then added speaker covers to make them look real. It's pretty simple, but it came out sick. These took forever and we're proud of all of them, but let me know which one's the best. I've abused a lot of shoes, but these might have it the worst. We started by grabbing one whole ton of concrete, 2,000 pounds total. It was not easy to move. Then we grabbed a piece of plywood and started measuring out the squares that we were going to use to make the mold for this concrete prison. We were going to use brackets to hold everything together, but we didn't have any. Thankfully, I have a degree in janky engineering, so we just used masking tape instead. Then we used a bunch of hot glue and a questionable method of application to seal all the edges. The whole idea here was to get a pair of shoes in the center of this big block of concrete. So to do that, we took one of the shoe boxes that the shoes come in and glued it to the bottom as kind of an anchor, and then glued the shoes to the top of that. We did this because this is only my second time working with concrete, and I wasn't sure if the shoes would just float to the top if we threw them in a big block of wet concrete. I added a whole bunch of tape around the whole box for some extra support, and then we started mixing the concrete. We tried using an actual concrete mixer, but that wasn't really working, so we resorted to a more unconventional method. No soft hands over here, brother. We used about 6 bags or 500 pounds of concrete to fill this box and seal this pair of from the concretes in concrete. Let me know what you think we're gonna do with it, though. Y'all saved my dumbass from a big headache, because I recently posted a video in which I installed new brake pads and rotors on my car, and it was quickly brought to my attention that I installed the last brake pad upside down, which I totally did on purpose because I wanted to test you guys and see if you'd notice, and you did. So good job, you passed. But let's fix that now. Free seat. This is already not wearing correctly. Alright, so here is our culprit. Obviously, it is upside down, which I meant to do, to test you. Alright, so it's already wearing unevenly. I'm gonna hope that just evens itself out over time. Alright, there we go. Right side up. Is my piston fucked? Now, I may not know what I'm doing, but that doesn't look right. Let's just see what happens. Somebody needs to take this car away from me. There's no way that I messed something this easy up. What a great day. The top 5 jankiest things I've done to the BMW. Number 5 is the rattle can jawbreaker paint job that I did. I think it's safe to say that any paint job done with rattle cans could be considered janky, but the uniqueness and cool factor alone on this one makes it somewhat okay. Number 4 is the under $100 homemade exhaust that I welded together horribly and slapped on the car. The welds are disgusting and it doesn't sound good at all, but from the outside it doesn't look half bad, and it doesn't sound that bad considering it's a $100 homemade exhaust. Number 3, my sunroof was leaking every time it rained, so I sealed it with silicone. Why not just use weather stripping? Well, because this is easier, and it doesn't open and looks like crap because I didn't clean it. But hey, at least it doesn't leak now. Number 2, this back window is held up with Gorilla Glue. Long story short, I couldn't get into the car. I had to break this window to get into it, and then instead of just replacing the glass, I bought a whole new door and the glass. But the actuator in this door was broken, so instead of fixing it, I just glued the window where it is because it didn't work in the first place. And number 1 by a mile is the hockey pucks and washers that I have it sitting on. And while it might be janky and ride terribly, it actually worked pretty well. All that work and it's still not even low. Low was never the goal. I wanted this just kind of OEM plus fitment, and it's still not even close to perfect, but it's a lot better than it was, and it's good considering this was free. So give me other janky ideas that I could do to this thing. I custom painted my E46 to look like a jawbreaker. Here's how I did it and how much it cost. First, of course, is the prep work, so I had to sand down the whole car, wash it all off, and then tape it up. That took me about a day and a half. And that is way longer than it should have taken me, but this is the first time I've done something like this, so it took me a little extra time. Once it was all prepped, I had to start painting. I chose rattle cans for this job, and a lot of people questioned that decision. But there's a few different reasons why I made it. Number 1 being I've always wanted to rattle can a car. Number 2 being I've always wanted a car that I didn't really have to care about and could do fun, janky stuff with. Number 3 is money. There's a lot of different colors in this paint job if you didn't notice, and if I had went out and bought all the professional grade stuff, it probably would have cost 3 times the amount. And the last reason being I know my way around a rattle can really well. I've used them my entire career. I'm confident with them, and I kind of wanted to test myself to see if I could get a half-decent paint job done with them. So in total, I went through about 32 cans, and that's including the 12 cans of 2K Clear that I burned through, which in the end didn't even seem to be enough. I wish I had more cans to do one more coat with, but for my first time using it, it came out pretty good. So with everything totaled up, I was all in for about $600, which sounds like a lot for a rattle can paint job, but that's because I have 8 different colors in here. Let me know how I did and what the next paint job should be. Maintenance, boo! It's no fun, but it's gotta be done because these rotors are warped and they feel terrible. So I tried to get the first one off. Of course, it wouldn't come off, and I didn't have an M8 bolt, so I had to take the Beamer to AutoZone to get one, and surprisingly, it made it there and back just fine. The rotor came off easily with the help of the bolt, and then I started taking the brake pads out of the caliper to take a look at them, and this was very obviously where the problem was occurring because these brake pads were wearing very unevenly. I threw some anti-seize on, threw the new rotor on, cleaned it up, and threw all the hardware back on before moving on to the rears, where, of course, I ran into another problem. This rotor wouldn't come off either, but it was my own dumbass fault because I had the parking brake on. And I broke that in the process, so I had to set out on a little mini side quest to fix that, and then I reinstalled everything else before I moved on to the other side. I needed to install a new ABS wheel speed sensor on the front driver's side because my dashes looked like a Christmas tree ever since I installed my coilovers and accidentally snapped the old sensor. It took me 30 minutes and $40 to fix, and the funniest part is the shop quoted me $600 to fix that. I threw some lube on the back of the brake pad because I saw some people on YouTube do that, and then I reinstalled everything. But would it even be an install if I didn't accidentally slam my knuckle on some part of the car? No, of course not. I threw some new hardware on the caliper bracket before reinstalling that and the new rotor, and then of course I lubed up everything to make sure there was no squeaky noises. Then finally I took the caliper and compressed the piston with my hands because I'm a man and not some soft-handed little boy. And that's it. Now we just need to see if it stops, and thankfully it did. So let me know what you think about this install. Have you ever seen a car that looks like a shoe? No? Well, neither have we, and that's exactly why we set out on a mission to paint my E46 to look exactly like our shoes. We worked around the clock on this thing, plus we had like 3 other projects going at the same time, so we had to come in the middle of the night to trace this rose onto the car and lay the base coat. Then we came back a few hours later the next morning to lay the rest of the details down. Zuki used like this grid pattern inside the rose to freehand all the sections inside it. I don't know how he does it, but it's crazy. The rose on the shoe is made of rubber and has a lot of depth, and we wanted this rose to look the same, so I came in and added some highlights and some shadows to the red and the green to make it look like it was popping off the car. And it was coming along really good. However, it took forever and was a lot of work, and we didn't want to do all that again. So for the rose on the other side, we just wrote "From the Concrete," which is the name of the shoes, about a bajillion times. We added a Kizzo logo to the diamond on the roof and then clear coated the whole car. And with that, the car was finally done. This was one of the hardest projects we've ever done. It was like 90 degrees every day that we were working on this thing, and it took forever, but it came out sick and it resembles the shoes perfectly. So let me know what you think about it. I never want to touch this stuff again. But this Turbo Civic build is going to need a lot of heat management, so I had to. And yes, you heard that right. We're finally working on the Civic. I locked in, and I swear we're going to finish this thing ASAP. And one of the first steps to do that is heat wrapping this turbo manifold because it is way too close to the brake lines and wiring harness. So I got some titanium heat wrap to hopefully help insulate some of that heat. But it was not going well because this stuff is hard to work with in the first place. Never mind on a manifold that's this tight. Giggity. But anyway, after I had my little meltdown and went through doing this and redoing this a million times, I finally reached for the plastic zip ties to hold everything in place temporarily, and that helped a lot. I was also trying a little too hard to make it perfect in the beginning, which is like literally impossible on something like this, so I kind of just did the best I could, and I got it to a point where it's good enough that it'll do its job. I also wrapped the downpipe in the meantime, and that took literally 10 minutes. It was the easiest thing in the world. Now, this is where things get Jakeified, because I wasn't liking how the manifold was looking, and it was a little loose at the end, so I bought some gold DEI tape to wrap the whole thing, which felt illegal and pointless and wrong, but it worked in the end, so I think it'll be okay. Let me know what you think about this setup, though.
Guess the price of this bag, get it for free.
5 grand? 4,500.
625.
10,000.
20 grand?
I would say about 3 grand.
980.
2,400. 1K?
1,200.
1,500.
5,500.
$2,500.
$800.
2 grand.
6 bands.
Like, it could be an easy 5 bands.
It ain't no fun, but it's gotta be done. The time has finally come to paint the Beamer, but before we can do any of that fun stuff, we have to prep. I started by removing the spoiler because I've always hated it. I filled the holes with JB Weld, and as janky as that may seem, it does the job. Then I started sanding away with an angle grinder, which again, probably isn't the correct way to do things, but there's nothing correct in this video, so if that's what you're looking for, look elsewhere. I used my hand to sand down some of the more hard to reach spots, and then I started cleaning it. First, I tried to use just a bucket of water, but I quickly realized that wasn't working at all, so I ran to the store and got some Dawn dish soap and a hose. I gave it a quick wipe down to see the spots that I missed. I went in and sanded those over again, and then I cleaned it a little bit more thoroughly this time, making sure to get all of the debris off the car. Once it was dry, I decided to get a head start on my taping and taped up some of the more easier to reach spots. I did the taillights and then I went to tape up the front emblem, but I realized it was literally just barely hanging on, so I pulled that off. I taped up the headlights and the grills and called it a day. Now, there is a lot more to be done on this car, but I can tell you the paint job that I'm gonna do is very experimental and complicated, so let me know how you think that's gonna go. It's time to see if my crazy idea for a paint job works or if I just wasted my time and money. The plan was to make the car look like a jawbreaker, so I threw a whole bunch of colors down, a white coat on top of it. Now I'm sanding through that white coat to reveal the layers underneath, and I was surprised by how many people guessed that correctly. I started by sanding just the body lines at first, and that was going pretty well, surprisingly, and it was looking pretty good until I thought to myself, that could use some more color. So I just started sanding away in a bunch of random spots, and I'm not sure how I feel about this decision still. I think I might have gone a little overboard. But I was way too deep into the process to give up now, so I had to keep moving forward. I sanded for about 16 hours by hand before I could finally clean off the paint and start spraying my 2K clear. And this is the moment where things started to come together a little bit, as I kind of thought it would, because the 2K clear just brought out the colors a whole bunch more and made everything look a lot more uniform. And then finally, after about 32 hours of sanding and painting and everything else in between, I was able to take the tape off and see the car in its final form. And I gotta say, for this being my first time ever painting a car and it being such an experimental idea, I think it came out pretty good. But let me know what you think. Did I go too far with the sanding, or are you feeling this jawbreaker paint job? I never want to touch this stuff ever again. I had the bright idea of making a one-to-one copy of our From the Concrete shoes with concrete. And to do that, you first need to make a mold from silicone of whatever you're trying to cast. So I took one of our shoes, I filled the back of it with polymer clay, I sprayed the laces with shellac to make sure they didn't stick to the silicone too much, and then I glued it to the bottom of the box. And I did this because I knew the shoe would float in the silicone, which would be absolutely disastrous. But just guess what happened when I poured the silicone? It immediately floated to the top. And I tried for a good hour to get this thing to stay in place, but silicone is the most sticky and most unsticky thing on the planet, which meant that there was absolutely no way for me to re-stick that shoe to the box. So I had to make a new box, and I screwed the bottom of the box together with the bottom of the shoe. I should have just done this in the first place, but I kind of wanted to get the sole in the mold. However, that was not an option at this point, and I kind of just settled for what I had. I came back a day later, took the shoe out, and then poured some concrete in it, and then came back another day later. I should have given it more time because you're about to see me break the back half of the shoe off, but I glued it all together, and it still looks pretty good. Plus, the amount of detail that this captures is absolutely bonkers. So even though this was a headache to make and it didn't come out perfect, I still love it. But let me know what you think about it. The stars and planets must have aligned perfectly, because not only did we create one of my favorite pieces ever, we did it with virtually nothing going wrong. And that's a pretty rare occasion. In the first part, you watched us make the mold and pour the concrete, but since then it's been 4 days, everything's dry, it's time to finish this thing. First, we had to make the base, and I wanted it to be this like octagonal pyramid, so we cut all the shapes out and taped everything together. It was going pretty smoothly until we realized that the base was probably a little too small to support the weight of the sculpture, so we took the bottom off and extended it a little bit to give it some more volume. We used pieces of linoleum flooring to do that and make the walls of the mold, and taped the hell out of it. It took all 4 of us to move this thing across the warehouse because it's like 400 pounds. Then we cracked open a new bag of concrete and started pouring it into the bottom of the mold. We gave it a few days to dry, and then we came back and ripped the mold off. It didn't really look dry, surprisingly, but I think that's because there was very little airflow in there, but I'm not really sure because I don't know how concrete works. Then we decided to try our hand at stonemasonry. We bought some chisels and started adding cracks all around the sculpture to make it look a little bit weathered. And I gotta say, this thing looks absolutely sick. It came out perfect with virtually no hitches, but let me know what you think. These were the first Kizzos to ever exist, and these are the most recent Kizzos. And my goal today is to give them the same treatment that the originals got, which means coffee dye and rope laces. And man, did this take me back, because I haven't done either of these things in so long. Also, now that I think about it, I can't believe I had the balls to do this to the original Kizzos. They weren't just like a pair out of the first drop. They were the first pair ever made, the first sample to exist. And my dumbass dumped them in coffee and then cut holes in them to add rope laces. But I also kind of had to because we had to promote the shoes and we had no other pairs. After the shoes had sat in the coffee for about 2 hours, I took them out and started making the holes for the rope laces. And I wish that I knew these drill bits existed back then, because I used to use a hot screwdriver to poke those holes, but this is way easier and cleaner. Once I had the rope cut to size, I had to lace the shoes, and I forgot how much I hated this. Then I found this brass tube, straw-looking thing, and I used that to make aglets. This whole project was really nostalgic for me. I love how these came out. They look like they're straight out of 2022, and I think they came out better than the originals, but let me know what you think. And go grab a pair if you haven't already, because there's very few left. Nobody else out here is doing promos like us. These are from the concretes. We dropped them on Saturday, and here's my favorite things we did for the rollout. We started by playing Minecraft IRL, which is a lot harder than it seems. We made a big ass box out of plywood, tape, and hot glue, nothing else. I was a little worried about the integrity, but the tape held all 500 pounds of concrete just fine, and it was all for this one shot. After that, we made another very heavy object. This time, a 6-foot tall diamond statue, of course, made of concrete. We had to custom make the mold with linoleum flooring, and then we sunk a pair of shoes in there. Because if you didn't already notice, shoes getting dumped into wet concrete is a very common theme for this drop. Then we made a base for it and chiseled into it to make it look like it was cracking in age. This was definitely my favorite project from the drop and one of my favorites of all time. Then for the grand finale, we painted my car to match the shoes, which I kind of regret now because we had to cover my beautiful masterpiece of a paint job, and the videos didn't even do that well, but hey, that's content. And the fact remains that we painted a damn car to match our shoes. Who else is doing that? Not to mention, we do stuff like this every month. There's still some pairs left on the website if you haven't already grabbed a pair, but let me know which one of these projects was your favorite.